Hello, R users. My name is John Kulas. I'm a 20-year professor of industrial and organizational psychology, 11-year user of R for normal, boring, statistical, and analytical operations. But for the last 8 or 9 years, the majority of the time using R. I've also been using R to fully execute projects. So not just to do analyses, but to write about those analyses. So every week, I hang out here with some friends and compatriots and collaborators on these sorts of projects that sometimes pop by. And we make ourselves available if there's anyone else out there who's interested in doing this. Using R, what most people think to be a quantitative or analytical statistics facilitating platform, using it not just for the statistical component, but for the entire project. So to make the paper or to make the report or to make your slide deck or to make a website, you can do it all within R. And so we think it's important to be able to do this. And so we're here and we want to make ourselves available if there's other people interested in doing it. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask. And that's kind of why we're here. We use this metaphor of an academic office hour. And so we call these open office hours just because we're here and we want to leave the door open if anyone has a question and they want to pop by and ask it. We want to help. We want to really promote this way of working because it minimizes error. And being psychologists, we're very interested in minimizing error where possible. And this is just so easy. It is just such a obvious way to minimize error. And there's a movement within the social and behavioral sciences toward what's called reproducible research. And what we're promoting, we think, is very consistent with this reproducible research kind of stance. Now, I have my own kind of soapbox on this. The psychologists, I don't think, fully, as a field, they're promoting it without really defining it. So the elements that I'm working on are probably more aligned with something called literate programming. And I've actually had some odd discussions with people about, yes, this is consistent with this concept of reproducible research, and people saying, well, no, I don't think that is, and I'm very adamant that it is. So anyway, we're here. We think that this is the way that work should be structured. If you're doing quantitative stuff, if you're working towards, if you're building slide presentations, if you're building reports, technical reports, feedback reports, if you're making papers, you can do them all within the same platform. And so because literate programming means different things to different people, I've actually been referring to this kind of component of reproducible research. I've been referring to it as executing a single project from within a single platform. And so single platform project execution, I think it's a bit wordy, but I think it captures well. Whoops, sorry about that. I think it captures well what we're endeavoring to do here. So we'll be here every Tuesday at 7 o'clock Eastern. And if there's anyone that has any questions, just pop them in the chat and I'll try to keep an eye on that. And that's our primary purpose. But in the absence of questions, what we've been doing is we've been focusing on and taking a look at features of these platforms that facilitate the creation of documents and slides and reports. And the feature that we're going to take a look at tonight is, if I can highlight it, sunglasses don't seem to want to be highlighted. And I got to be very strategic here because there's a hyperlink. Doggone it, the moment I said it. Anyway, iframes are something that we did take a look at a few weeks ago when we covered embeddings, but we're going to take a closer look at them tonight. Those of you that have been following know that we've been choosing topics based on the letter of the alphabet, starting with A through, we did an ABC session for a few weeks, and now we're up to I. And so as we were up to I thought it might be good to revisit this concept of iframes. So we'll do that. But before we do that tonight, we're actually going to recap what happened last week, because the way that these weekly sessions are intended is exploratory, and I don't do a ton of prep prior to these weekly sessions, what I want to do is kind of let other people know how someone with a little bit of experience with this just explores these features and kind of plays with them and learns about them. And so there, there there isn't a lot of scripting here with this. And because of that, what we do at the beginning of each session is we do a more scripted recap summary of what we learned from last session. So those of you that stumble across this and might find the title interesting, make sure to look at the next week's presentation as well, because the next week's presentation is where you're probably going to have more condensed and boiled down and specific points of learning in those follow-up sessions. So in the week subsequent to the week with the title that you might be interested in. Man, I'm wordy tonight, aren't I? All right, let's get to someone who's not quite as verbose as I am, and that would be Mr. Bullwinkle J. Moose.
Well, Bullwinkle was really up in the air last time. For in an effort to reach Rocky in creepy old Bleakley House, he sat on their giant mousetrap and fired himself over the wall. Unfortunately, the window he was heading for proved too small for him, and he got stuck fast high above the ground. Meanwhile, inside the house, a dazed Rocky was peering about in the gloom. Suddenly, a huge form appeared in front of him.
Is that you, Bullwinkle? Your teeth are chattering. You got a cold?
But of course, when Rocky struck a match to find his way out, it wasn't Bullwinkle at all. Instead...
Hokey smoke, it's a 6-foot mouse!
And Rocky bravely eluded the clutches of the strange creature, which then began to chase him from room to room of the old mansion. Rocky made a game try, but soon found himself trapped.
Uh-oh, there's no way out of this room. The window's blocked up.
Windows blocked up. Just not to spoil anything, but that was the rear end of Bullwinkle J. Moose there that was blocking the window. I know I'm spoiling a cartoon from the 1960s for people. So last week we took a look at hyperlinks. And again, there's a little more complexity to these than I was probably giving credit to. Like anything else, when you're looking at not just utilizing these functions, but kind of some of the underlying dependencies and the underlying philosophy and the underlying kind of thought that goes into creating these functions and these capabilities. It's actually fairly impressive. So there's hyperlinks again embedded throughout these slides. The slides are available in the comments if you want to click on them. If you come across this later and the comments aren't available, the link to the slides will be in the description of the video. The other thing I'm doing, because more people are seeming to access these, not when they're live, but after the fact, and that's great. However you want to use them, that's fine with me. But what I guess I played with last week, but I didn't do it very early. So late in the week, when I saw that more and more people were kind of accessing the slides, what I went in and I went in and made timestamps. So I'm going to try to do that as well. So in addition to a link to the slides in the description, you'll probably see some timestamps, and that's how YouTube puts those. If you've noticed in videos that you watch, sometimes on the progress bar, you can kind of see it cut up, and there's descriptions on the different sections. The way that the contributors, or the way that the people that are actually crafting the videos have to do that, it's my understanding anyway, is to put timestamps within the description. So you're going to start to see those. I thought about doing this for a while, and I decided not to, because in order to do that, I have to go and look at these myself, and I'm sure many of you out there have the same experience. It's a common human experience to not really be super comfortable hearing and seeing yourself, but for you, I will do it for you. Lovely people who seem to be interested, or at least permissible with me babbling on about these literate programming principles. So last week we took a look at hyperlinks, and we kind of cut them up into two different slices. We looked at external versus internal hyperlinks. The internal hyperlinks We can also classify as just cross references within your document, whatever it is that you're crafting. And so with the external links, we actually found something kind of neat that I was not previously aware of. And that thing we found that was neat that I wasn't previously aware of was there were two different options. So one is a code links option within the YAML. Now the YAML is the front matter of these documents. Generally, oops, sorry about that. I'm going to give people motion sickness again tonight. Sorry, hope everyone took their Dramamine because tonight's apparently another motion sickness night. The YAML is isolated by these 3 dashes to begin and 3 dashes to end. It's the only time within any of these documents that we're using, these Quarto documents, that we're going to use fences that are a little different. So I would also call this an opening fence and a closing fence. But the specification of that is definitely unique and reserved for the front matter, what's called YAML. And these index numbers here, these are accurate. So the very first line of your Quarto document should just be 3 dashes. And then inside of this is meta information saying this is important for the entire document. And so the thing that I found that I hadn't been aware of before was 2 different categories of kind of supplementary information that you can include in your HTML documents. So again, Quarto, this platform that we've been using to generate these products, I think they're endeavoring toward a scripting kind of goal of the same script will be operative with all different types of product output. Not quite there yet, so there's still going to be some distinctions and some differences between specifically PDF type products and everything else. So PDFs are still quite unique. So the other links and the code links sections are really easy additions to put within your HTML products. And within the YAML, it's just simply this other links or code links specification. Now, these 2 different functions operate the same. What they're going to do is they're going to create, and I didn't put, apologies, but I didn't put a link to the entire document in this week's slides. I just made it a lightbox figure so it pops out a little bit. So the functionality is going to be missing here on your access to it. Let me actually pull it up straight from my files to show. And I did that primarily because of the hosting that I have. So there's some issues with the hosting. So you see this other links appear in the upper right hand margin. And we saw last week that one of the neat things about this was it stays glued to this location no matter where you navigate to within the document. So this is a very tiny document. So there's not a whole lot of information. Contained there. But if there were more information, then that other links would stay glued to that upper right hand corner kind of location. Now, if we had put code links, the only thing that would change, the information here on lines 7 through 9 can stay the same. The only thing that changes is the title here of this other links. It would change to code links. And you could probably override that if you would like to. We didn't look into that. Again, this code links and this other links, these options were something that I had not come across before. But as we're talking about hyperlinks, it's neat to be able to put supplementary information in kind of a almost table of contents like location, but separated from the table of contents, which generally by default is going to be rendered in the left-hand margin, not the right-hand margin. There are hyperlinks in this note as well. If you hover on the note, you should be able to get over to them. The icon that we used was this alarm clock. Now you can take icons. We tried quite a few of them in the past as we've tried these bootstrap icons. Not all of them have been equally accessible. Sorry, I'm going to give people, I'm having a hard time. My hover is not Sorry, my hover's not working well on my computer. But the bootstrap icons were not always well accessible for the free tier. Now, last week we found that we didn't have any problems. Everything we tried, we could go ahead and put within line 8 there, where we have the icon and the name for that bootstrap icon that you see in terms of the rendering with the alarm clock is just alarm. And then the reference, you can put a hyperlink to whatever reference you want, and you just make sure to have that HTTP prefix on it. And that seems to be important, not just within YAML specifications, but it seems to be important with all of these types of products that we're dealing with. It doesn't like just www. You want to use that HTTP prefix. That's important when we're using hyperlinks. Not something we talked about last week, but something that I've noticed over the course of using hyperlinks kind of copiously here. So that was neat. And then the other thing I guess we looked at was including an icon, because on these slides, my hyperlinks don't always have, the hyperlinks that I use don't have very strong visual cues. So we had talked over the course of a few weeks, we had talked about maybe incorporating some different cues. One visual cue you can use is to either in the YAML, or you can do this on a link by link basis if you want, and that's what the note is referring to. You can do this on a link by link basis using that curly bracket specification. So you can actually request an icon to appear alongside every hyperlink, every external hyperlink that you have. And that icon is going to be a square with an arrow on it. That's the default icon. And that's just an easy set. That's an easy toggle. You can set that to true or false. We decided we didn't like it. So generally speaking, we'd probably keep that false and look for a visual cue through some other means. Maybe changing the color of the hyperlink. That seems to be, aside from colorblind individuals, that seems to be something that probably would work for the majority of people. And again, that box, that extra icon, it's maybe something that you might want to consider if there's consideration of visually impaired individuals. I would imagine that screen readers are going to pick up on that better. And then the link external new window is another feature that we played with last week, because it's nice to be able to control when someone accesses a hyperlink, whether that hyperlink interrupts what they're currently using, if what they're currently using is being viewed through a browser, or if it simply opens another tab. And so that's another really easy link external new window within the YAML. If you want a new tab to pop up instead of interfering with the slide deck that you see, you just set that to true. Now, if you play with mine, I'm going to exit full screen here so you can see this a little better. If you play with my hyperlinks, you're going to notice that for my slide deck, I do not have the external tab opening up enabled. I actually have an override, so you're going to be operating from within the same tab. And for me, that works okay on these slides because I use this back and forth arrow quite a bit on my browsers. But if we wanted to, we could actually override that. And so that was so neat that we thought we might try it with PDFs as well. Now, I did some research on that. What I said last week was I said we weren't able to find, toward the end of last week's session, we weren't able to find a command that was going to be operative within PDF documents the same way as it was within HTML documents. And I guess we can just pop there now. So what I actually found was that, well, PDFs are not intended to use tabs. So tabs are not something that natively is accepted or is allowable or permissible through PDFs. And so I think one of the reasons that was confusing for me, and again, we use this process to craft documents all the time, but I'm not a developer. We're not developers. We use these products, these end products daily, but in terms of kind of some of the underlying developer kind of thoughts and intents that go into them, we're not going to be fully familiar with them. So the PDFs don't natively have this difference with tabs. However, when I use PDFs, I have my browser, I have my PDF viewer, which might actually also be referred to as a handler. So I have my PDF handler or viewer set up as Microsoft Edge. And within Edge, I have gone in there and I've said, hey, if you see a new PDF, please open that in a new tab. And so let me show you what that actually looks like. Let's take a quick look at that. I think I'm just going to take, poor Casey. Casey's got to show up one of these weeks because I keep overwriting the Casey file just because I know that it has stuff in it that we can just take a look at from one day to another. Now, this is just a template Quarto document with a different title on it. I guess if you recall, a few weeks ago we had a project and we created something called the Mooster piece. I guess at some point I created a Mooster piece too. But if we change this to a PDF, we'll let it render. Usually PDFs take a little longer. There's a intermediate step in the generation of PDFs where something called a text file is rendered. But so if I pull that up, you can see this is Microsoft Edge. Now, if I were to pull this up again out of my viewer, you see another tab opens up. Every time I open this up, a new tab opens up. And so this is kind of what I was thinking would be a neat function if we could kind of mimic that with external links. Now it turns out that this is not a built-in capability that is within Quarto specific to PDF documents. What this is an option that I've chosen in terms of Microsoft Edge as my PDF viewer. So this is actually an option that you can enable within your browser or within your handler. So that was some of the confusion that I actually had on that. So this is not something that the opening up an external tab is not going to be something that you can control via the YAML of your document script if you're interested in PDFs. Now, if you really wanted to, so I did a little, of course, that's not a sufficient answer. So I did a little further digging, and you could actually do this. If you wanted to do it, you're going to have to get into some of the language that's used underneath Quarto. And that sounds kind of intimidating, but people do it all the time. So you do that through creation of something called a Lua filter. And Lua is the scripting language that I believe Quarto was built on. Pandoc, the software that kind of transforms the Markdown and the LaTeX that we write, it helps in the process of turning that into a PDF or turning it into an HTML file. So it's a very foundational, fundamental scripting language, and people write in that to extend the capabilities and change and customize kind of what's done in Quarto. So if we really, 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 really wanted to be able to have links open up a second tab within whatever handler we're using, we could probably write a Lua filter. I can't. Maybe with the assistance of AI, I could. But that's something maybe in 2 or 3 years that we could maybe try to handle on our own, I suppose. But for now, it's not something that ports over in terms of a one-to-one matching or mapping between what we see with HTML files and what we see with PDFs. I thought maybe it would, just because of the way in which I interact with PDFs, which is not through Adobe, but it's through using Microsoft Edge as my handler or my browser. Okay, and then I'll try to be quick with this. The second main thing we looked at, after looking at external links, we also looked at internal links. And these internal links are facilitated by use of curly brackets adjacent to the thing you're linking to. You can also, we alluded to this last week. I know I mentioned it, but we didn't live code any of this. But you can actually also, instead of using this curly bracket convention, within the prose part of your document, so within the actually writing of normal words and summary information of your document, if you're in your quantitative script, if you're in a code chunk, you can specify the same information within the code chunk through the use of a label and a fig cap. So the label is here, fig pretty, and it's also here within the code chunk. And the figure caption, now usually in these square bracket conventions, we oftentimes with images, oftentimes we leave those blank. If you don't leave them blank, that's going to actually render as a figure caption. And so I just used the same figure caption. And then within the document itself, you call that up, whether you specify it through curly brackets adjacent to an image callout, or whether you specify that within a code chunk, you call it up the same. And you call it up just by using the @ symbol. So @ and then whatever the tag is on your label. So please see @figure pretty, and so there's a hyperlink here. Now in HTML files, this hyperlink is going to give you a preview upon hover. We've been using that a lot. We've been talking about that a lot. That's not something that is functional within RevealJS slides. So there's just going to be a hyperlink that takes you to it. And so you see the numbering that occurs automatically when we use this type of convention to cross-reference. And you can see the figure caption as well. And again, that figure caption is going to render the same whether we actually, whether we specify that figure within a code chunk or whether we specify it within the text itself using this exclamation point, square bracket, parentheses, and then curly brackets with the tag, with the actual figure tag on it. Okay, and so let's do one more thing here just to show the difference between RevealJS slides and HTML slides. We'll see. I'm not 100% if this will work because I have in my YAML of these weekly slide decks, I have a lot of subcommands. You can see a lot of them are commented out because many of these we tested out on these weekly sessions, but some of them I was guessing are going to be specific for RevealJS slides themselves. And you see some of the different renderings here. So the different ways you specify these files does generally matter in terms of formatting where things are placed and what they look like just by default. Now, what I wanted to do is I wanted to show that the preview upon hover operates differently within a RevealJS or just an HTML file. So this is just a long HTML file giving you a preview there of what's about to come accidentally. The tabs are still operative, so the tabs are nice whether you use either one of these. The cross-reference, though, if I hover that cross-reference at this point, you do get that preview upon hover, which is just kind of that really nice Quarto feature. But again, it's not something that is shared across, even though RevealJS slides are fundamentally HTML file types, this functionality is not something that's shared within RevealJS slide decks. I was tempted to say unfortunately, but I'm sure the good people at Posit who are putting all this stuff together, I'm sure they have good reason for that. I think very little of their products in terms of differences across different product types. I think very little of those differences are not well thought out and intentional. It seems like the teams working on these products are just really sharp. Okay, so that was last week, hyperlinks. And again, I'm going to start trying to put timestamps in so people who access these not live but after the fact, so they can actually navigate these sections a little bit better. I know especially if I'm alone, I have a tendency to just sit here and ramble. We're already about a half hour in, and I'm always amazed that it takes a half hour to get this far. It must have been torture to be a student of mine. Just sitting there and be like, get to the point, Kulas. I know I have gotten that feedback on presentations, on professional presentations. Zoom Zoom, you get, for whatever reason, Zoom, Teams, whatever the virtual format is, as long as cameras are operational, you get more direct feedback that way. I hate it. I don't like this. I don't like talking into a void. Um, but on Zoom, I do get more feedback, and I remember one specific occasion at a professional meeting where someone just it wasn't just me kind of being smart about it and understanding and reading the room and having any sort of emotional intelligence. It was literally this person saying, "Come on, get on with it." So that's always good when that happens. So tonight we're going to talk about iframes. There's a bunch of resources kind of linked on here, hidden. And again, we've talked about iframes before, and these are going to be specific again for HTML product types. But the point of these is to embed other products within your focal product. So your focal product here, what this is the thing that we're focused on, or our primary product is a RevealJS slide deck. If we wanted to, we could embed other slide decks within this slide deck, and that's what HTML files are used for. We talked a little bit about that the other day, but I found some other functions and some other functionality of iframes that I thought was enough for us to cover it again. So the one that I'm really interested in trying is hyperlinked off this title. But before we do that, let's just do let's do a more fundamental iframe kind of example before we get to the newish kind of thing. I guess one caveat here that I should mention is, as again I'm going through these features and saying, "Ooh, that's neat, and that's a shiny new thing. Let's go try it." And I love that. I don't like that. These iframes this capability has been in existence for a long time for web developers, and there's a little bit of controversy with them. I guess I didn't realize it, but they are one of the criticisms of iframes has to do with potential security vulnerabilities that they might introduce. So you can read about that if you want. Interestingly, the preview panel that you see in RStudio, I know many of you are using RStudio as your IDE, as the way in which you interact with R and generate these products. That's what I do as well. The preview pane itself is an iframe. So if we were to inspect that, you can actually see what's identified there as an iframe. And so the iframe that RStudio uses, I believe there's something called Sandbox, and Sandbox apparently is helpful in terms of some of these security issues. Again, good people at Posit, they know what they're doing. So the only quibble I have about the use of iframes through the RStudio IDE is it's been wonky the last year or so. So prior to about a year ago, I would say, the previews that you got were very good representations of the actual expanded product. So hopefully I don't have computer issues again tonight. Things are acting a little funny. But when I maximize this and I look at it within a browser, so within an actual product that's intended to show the HTML scripting itself, this looks like what I want it to look like, what it's expected to look like for people who are interacting with it. There isn't always, unfortunately now, a great one-to-one match between the information located in the preview panel. Here you can start to see there's a little, now this has to do with the sizing, I'm guessing. Nope, doesn't have to do with the sizing. But there's some differentiation here between the way this looks in terms of the product and the way it renders within the iframe itself in terms of the RStudio preview pane. And that's been a little bit of it's not I know it's there, so if you know that the issue exists, it's less of a bugger, I guess, right? So but it's not great. So I don't know what to do about that other than just don't fully trust the preview panel, which is kind of the point I'm at. So when I'm creating something and that something is an HTML product, I know to look at it within a different browser because the preview panel might not be a good representation of what it's actually going to look like, unfortunately. Okay. So iframes, the way that we actually use them is we're gonna this is HTML. We're gonna use direct HTML, but you can do that within these Quarto documents. We can make an HTML chunk, or we can actually just put the HTML straight in, and that's generally how I use iframes. Is I just put the HTML straight within the document itself. I'm gonna look and see. I thought I had a different. I think I have a different link to some resources that we can. What is that? I don't know where that came from. That was really weird. There we go. So this is what I was looking for. So on the second page of the slide deck, there's a very general introduction to iframes, and I go to this site quite a bit. This W3 Schools. I'm not endorsing them. I don't know anything about them. Just as someone who really didn't know what HTML was probably 3 years ago, but now realizing that a lot of products and a lot of things that I'm using and making are based on HTML fundamentally, this has been a helpful site for me. And so the markup or the actual specification of the iframe itself is just this angled brackets, and generally the HTML or markup, and I'm not sure which is the more appropriate way to specify that. But the way that these interface with our Quarto documents is there's an opening tag and then there's a closing tag. And that closing tag is usually angle bracket, and then / and then it's a repeat of the opening tag there, so the iframe. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Again, this schools, W3 Schools, I like it because they dumb stuff down for people like me. And let's go ahead and, you know what, let's use Casey again. Sorry, Casey, if you're watching. Casey is another Mooster piece. I'm going to change it to an HTML again. And the content in here is nothing groundbreaking. It's just content. It looks like I did do a tag here. So it's almost content from just kind of the default content that comes populated within a Quarto document when you ask Quarto to give you a template. Let's go ahead and put a picture in. We always put pictures in. I'm a big picture guy. So let's look for a real moose this time if it's a Mooster piece. Ooh, that's a scary looking moose. You know, mooses, meese, multiple moose. I'm not sure the way to say it. But in real life, these things are crazy big. Like, you don't get a good sense of it just there next in the field. Like, that grass is probably 15 feet tall. And that's not an exaggeration. 15 feet tall, I'm telling you. That's how tall that grass is. So I right-clicked on that image of the moose in the 15-foot tall grass. And I'm going to use my exclamation point, square bracket, parentheses, convention, and just paste in that URL within RStudio. I know I just panned the preview panel, but RStudio is great within the scripting environment that it gives you oftentimes, not always, but usually it'll give you feedback that that image is being read in. So we can render that again, and the image should come up within our file. There's our moose within our Mooster piece. And the reason we're actually doing this is I want to embed something. So let's embed this week's slides. Let's try that. So I'm going to put in, oops. You know, speaking of functionality, I know that you can probably only copy one thing at a time. I know that that's probably good. I'm sure there's good reason for that. But I wonder if, I don't know, is there some sort of capability? There probably is some shortcut to go back to like previous copied things to paste, like Control VV or Control I don't know, W. Does that actually go back 2 copies ago or something? Seems like that could be useful. So we're going to try just the straight iframe here, and this looks a little funny within this file, but we'll see if it actually works. This is just straight the code that I took from the W3 Schools site. Let's just see what it does. Again, the preview, don't trust the preview. So refuse to connect, but it looks like something is there. What I thought, and so this, again, this might have something to do with security issues. What I just thought might be actually fun is if we link to this week's slides. So that'd be kind of meta. So let's see if we can get this week's slides within our document. And I'm just going to replace the URL there with the source. Title, we shouldn't need the title. I'm just going to take that out, and we'll just be very basic with our iframe specification. This live coding stuff, I think it's important, but I don't know. There's a little, like, I don't really have much of an ego. I don't care that much, but look at that. Now, so you're getting, I didn't realize by default, I don't know if this is just my browser, but you're actually getting a little slide indicator on the right hand portion of my slides. Do you see that? Looks like a tic-tac. Tic-tac's going from top to bottom there as I make you sick going through the slides. Now all the functionality should be here as well. You see the rendering looks a little bit different, but I should be able to go from tab to tab. The hyperlinks should be there. Hyperlinks might be a little different actually, because do we hyperlink? There we go. Okay. So it is opening up in a different tab. We can make this bigger. So one of the things we should do with this iframe is it's really small. So we should see if we can actually make it larger. So let's see. Again, the common kind of theme of these weekly sessions is Kulas with way too many tabs open, and so he loses track of stuff. Let's see if I can see if I can link to the help page that I want. There we go. That's amazing. So here's some kind of modifiers that we can put on it. What I was looking for is just height, but there should be a width as well. There's sandbox. You see sandbox. This is, again, there's some security implications to these sandbox values. These are the values. This is the field. Sandbox is the field. From psychology parlance, we would call it a variable, and the levels of the variable. I sometimes call variables vars because of so many years of SPS. I believe it or not, I love R like crazy, but prior to R, I was very proficient at a software platform used for statistics called SPSS. And so I used it so frequently. I probably coded in SPSS, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours a day, regularly, 5 days a week, 6 days a week. But so when I think of variables, I sometimes just think vars. I don't think I'll ever get rid of that. We can put borders on it as well. The thing I was really curious about here is the width. I want to see if we can get the width of that a little wider. Now, just by default, I went in there and did a space between my ending angle bracket there, and that's something that I've just developed recently because I've been using the Iconify package so frequently. And the Iconify package, look at that. Ooh, she looks even kind of cooler with her glasses cut off like that. That is one cool lady. That is one cool chick. I kind of like it like that, actually. And now instead of the pill, I get this little right arrow thingy. Leave it on Kirk and Bones there. Which, by the way, I just kind of realized right now that, did they call him Bones? He was a doctor. I think his real name, I forget his real name. Mick something, maybe? I don't know. But did they call them bones because of the old sawbones? Because a doctor could be called a sawbones, right? Does anyone know this? Is this just me? Height, we should be able to change. I don't know. The width 100 makes a lot of sense in terms of the page size. I know as I looked into these previously, the height specification nowhere seemed to act. Well, I guess it does make sense. So within an HTML file, if you think about it, the vertical space is fairly undefined. So the vertical space is going to be as big as it needs to be. So it does make sense that this would be in a different unit. Now, typically when they don't specify unit, that's pixels. So we'll try 500. I like that moose. Look at that. So this is actually a very nice representation. I mean, this looks exactly like what my slide deck looks like. And so iframes are pretty neat because you can embed, put bones there again, because you can embed an entirely different product within your HTML product. Now, I can envision this being very useful with a slide deck, for example. So if I wanted access to, and I did this, if you look at, if you look at the slide deck from a few weeks ago, I embedded via iframe an entire slide deck that explained how this was the GitHub. This must have been the GitHub session. So I embedded an entire slide deck that explains how to set up your local computer to connect with GitHub and download the Git software so you can actually use GitHub as kind of a project management resource. Now, my tic tacs have changed into this status bar on the bottom here. So there are slightly different kind of things that are happening, and that likely, I'm speaking out of turn here, I'm just completely speculating, but I'm guessing that has to do with the way in which these things might look on different browsers. So this being Microsoft Edge, that's not a browser that I usually only look at PDFs through Microsoft Edge. I love it. All that fun. I mean, iframes are very, very powerful. Very, very cool. Now, one thing, if we get a little time, that I would like to do is I would like to embed a product that has other stuff embedded in it and see how, see if we can, I don't know, end up generating a portal to a different dimension or something like that, because I think that might actually happen. So let's look for the presentation that had the access to, that had an iframe already embedded in it. So that must have been not last week, but must have been, oh geez, 9. What was the last day of 9? Whatever month 9 is. That was 30. So 9:30, I must have had a slide deck. Yeah, so on this slide deck, if we go to the end of it, here, this is what I was referring to. So this is actually a Jerningen slide deck, and I've mentioned that before. You can see if you can see that, I know it's kind of small, but there's actually 43 different slides. So let's link to this. So I'm going to swap out this week's slides in our Mooster piece, or Mooster piece 2, sorry. And let's see if we have embedding within embedding within embedding. I mean, we could test this for, I feel like Ant-Man. We're just getting smaller and smaller and smaller and keep embedding stuff. So there's that week's slides. Again, the functionality is there, so we can just go straight to the slide I wanted to. Now one thing I'm getting, and this is, I guess, to be expected, is either the mouse wheel or the arrow key usage. It kind of wants to work on both, right? So I'm trying to just kind of keep the iframe stable and arrow through it, but it's also navigating this entire page. Anyway, super cool. Love it, love it, love it. Iframes are wonderful. They're wonderful for accessing full other products that you can then reference and I'm using access too much, but have access to through your focal product, the thing that you're currently working on. There's one other thing I wanted to look at tonight before we end, and again, there's other resources here if you're interested in them. But I did stumble across kind of an interesting capability that I thought was interesting. And this person, and again, I was just kind of doing a search for iframes to see what's out there and to see if there were any people working on extensions for Quarto that maybe extend the use of iframes or facilitate their incorporation. Based on what we just saw, I don't think you need a lot of facilitation. But this person developed a repository to act as well. This GitHub repository is a repository to act for a gallery of iframes that are intended to be used within Quarto presentations, and so this person actually does walk you through how to utilize this, and their intent here was to use moving images as backgrounds of slides. Now, I've done this before, and you've seen me do this, but I do this by linking to existing GIFs. What this person has is the capability of taking whatever in motion thing that you have access to and utilizing that as the background of your slide presentation. And so that's pretty cool. It's a little bit different. So it's a little bit different in terms of what you can access. And what you can access, there's links here in terms of making your own thing. And he recommends taking things from this place called CodePen. And CodePen has, if you kind of scroll through it, it has a bunch of kind of movable. It's somewhere apparently where developers just kind of make stuff and show other developers what they've actually made. I did see some Halloween themed stuff here, and it looks like it's no longer on one of the front pages. But so that's something that you could do a search through there and find something that you think is maybe appropriate for your project and incorporate it. But the other thing that he has is he also has a bunch that he's worked on. And so he's got a rotating earth, and these are all backgrounds that you can put on your slide presentation. And again, some of them are going to look similar to backgrounds that I've used. And when I use them, it's an easy transition, but I'll show you where I pull them from. So the matrix one was kind of looking familiar to me because I've used that before. But I am constrained to what I see on a page like this. So this I've actually used as a background before, and it's very easy to do within Quarto. It's just that curly bracket convention after the specification of a slide title. What Emil has come up with is actually going to be a little bit different. Where are we? Here we are. So you should be able to be more customized in this if you like. If you don't want to be more customized, you can go ahead and take some of Emil's templates. And so we can look here through some of what he has. Meatballs, I kind of like meatballs. And so let's go ahead and see if we can incorporate some of what he has. You know what? I kind of like that earth. With 3i Atlas looming, I'm feeling like maybe this is the last time we'll get to... No, let's not do that, because that's too much. Like, it reminds me of 3i Atlas too much. Let's try meatballs. Tetris looks pretty cool. I wonder if we stay on the page too long, if it's game over. Or if it somehow clears out. It looks like... Oh, the columns just clear out themselves. Okay. That's not that... I don't know. It's not that apocalyptic. We can't use it if it's not apocalyptic. So what he's recommending to do is to download... If you want to utilize one of the iframes that he has, you can go ahead and download that template. Again, there are He also has specifications on here, and this is all off of the hyperlink on the first level heading or the title of the iframes slide in this week's slide deck. He does have how to use, and so his recommendation is to add a folder next to your QMD file. In that folder, add the following files, and these files should be in the zip that we just created. And then the specification, again, it's the specification is just going to use these curly brackets. I don't think there's any sort of, this isn't an extension, but I do not believe that background iframe, curious. I think background iframe is coming specifically from the downloaded information that we actually have, I'm guessing. Preload iframes, true. I don't think we need to do that because I think that's default within these Quarto files, but let's go ahead and try this. So I'm gonna go into a project directory because I think that's going to be easiest. So R2D2, we're working on diagrams, and this must be a diagram. This must be a diagram folder. I guess we can try to run one of these. So R2D2, the paper. I don't remember specifically. Now this is a PDF. We're not going to want a PDF. So I'm going to have to change that. I'm going to have to change it to a RevealJS document. We'll probably take out the, yeah, this was using D2 diagrams. So I'm going to change that to a RevealJS. Or you know what? Let's not do that. Let's just, within this project directory, let's just create a Quarto presentation. That makes a lot more sense. And call it meatballs, because I think that's what we're using. So let's render meatballs within R2D2. We'll just call it again meatballs. And again, there's no CSS, there's no styling specification here. It's just the standard Quarto presentation. This is what they look like out of the box before someone like me goes in there and kind of goofs them up, makes them look different. So what we're gonna do now is we're going to see if we can follow his recommendations in terms of how to access his iframes to be used as backgrounds. So he says add a folder next to your QMD file. My QMD file is in that project directory. In that folder we should have index, script, and CSS. And that should be in the zip file that we have. So boy, this is giving me flashbacks. So we had, I forget what we were looking on, but what we were working on, but I had, I'm going to extract that to R2D2. That's already there. I'm having flashbacks. We had, I forget what week it was, but I could not, oh, it was the R2D2 stuff. I could not unzip a file. And so, talk about embarrassing. Can't unzip in front of a bunch of people. So let's actually look in, our project files and see if we have anything there. There it is, meatballs. So within meatballs, I do have an index. I do have a JS file. There's a README as well. Okay. But in terms of his specifications, he's saying use this background iframe. Now again, background iframe, before we quit tonight, we will do a search, maybe a AI search, and see if background iframe is an actual Quarto specification. I didn't think it was. We'll ask for meatballs because that's the folder we put it in. The RevealJS document, or the slide script itself is in the R2D2 folder. The meatballs folder is a subdirectory of that folder, so this should work, I would think, on line 6. So what we're expecting is not the title slide, but the first slide to have that meatballs background. I mean, they're not very appetizing looking meatballs because they're like very colorful. This is not found. Okay, let's see what we did wrong. So that not found is, oops, definitely something new. So make sure I spelled it right first of all. Meatballs, it looks like it. I wonder if it has anything to do with the kind of heading level. Nope, it doesn't look like that's it. Okay, so the other thing we can try, so before I get too experimental here, I think we might want to try a couple of his different options here. So we might want to try not just meatballs, but we might want to try a different one as well. And then let's also see what else he said here we need to do. So title can be empty, title background iframe, my iframe. Index, I don't think index matters. It shouldn't matter. I mean, generally speaking, if you want to publish something, calling it index is a good idea. Like, what I'm curious about is, I'm curious if maybe we should try a different one and see if it was just the template or see if it's our specification. So rotating earth. Now there's two of them because this one I have actually tried before, so I did go in there and try this. So I think I did get this one to work. The other thing, well, we should be okay. I didn't try it. I think I did it in a fresh folder. No, I don't think that should have any consequence. But I guess it could. So we now have meatballs. I wonder if, no, that looks okay. So meatballs is there. What one did we just do? Rotating earth. So rotating earth. Again, I don't like those dashes in these folder names, but we'll see. Well, if we do that, we got to change the name. Yeah, it really didn't like meatballs. No, it doesn't like rotating earth either. Not found. Okay, let's look at any sort of errors that we might be getting here. It looks to me like it's our path specification. So it might have something to do with our project in terms of where it's actually looking. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and see if I can kind of force it. And this is one problem solved. And then we would work our way back from this. The problem with this is I have so many words in that I'm more likely to. Okay, well this looks more promising actually. So we did get it was pulling something up. Just didn't like it. Let's try before we say fail on this. Let me try a new project. And we'll put it in the same place, but we'll just call it Earth. By same place, I'm sorry, I'm kind of not talking through well what I'm doing. By same place, the same location on my computer. And we'll follow Emel's recommendations. It should not matter what we actually call this. What he wants us to call it index. I don't think that matters. Let's go back to our downloads. Find the rotating, or I guess we can try meatballs since we know. It could be an extraction thing as well. I might be not extracting it appropriately. Let's try to extract it just to the same download file, and then I'm going to copy this time. Since my zips are working weird, we'll see if that has any. Again, it shouldn't have any sort of consequence, but it's possible that it does. And within Earth, I'm going to paste that meatballs folder. So now we have a meatballs folder within there, and our specification we take from Emil here. Emil? That's a cool name, Emil. Do you suppose that's French? What is Emil? I don't know what the origins of Emil is. I think Emil was the name of a character in a comic book that I used to read. For some reason, I'm thinking Scrooge McDuck. I know that sounds weird, probably. But. And then I'm not going to call it index, even though he says call it index, because I think that just is. I think that should only have a consequence with the publishing aspect of this. I'll call it gobbledygook. Still not finding it. All right, let's give this one more careful read and see if we can figure this out. Add a folder next to your QMD. It cannot have any consequence index. Although I guess this is called index, but it's in a different location, so it shouldn't be. Oh, preload frames. I guess we didn't do that. Again, read the directions, probably smart. Now again, it doesn't like, see that's what's telling, I'm not thinking that is the issue, because to me, we're getting this file not found, which to me is just odd. It's possible these quotes are screwing us up. Oh, come on. Really? So it was a quotes thing. I mean, it's good that we found it. But. Okay. So we should be able to, I kind of like that actually. But we should be able to go to our previous R2D2 and amend that as well. Now I don't like I really don't like the specification here. I did look at his repo, and it hasn't been active for a year, and that might be because you don't need to use this. It may have something to do with differences in Quarto and the version of Quarto in terms of looking for those double quotes versus not looking for those double quotes. But it looks like our issue is quotes. So what do we call it? Meatballs? So I'm going to take off our attempt to do the whole file path specification. And now what we should have is after the title page, we should just have a first page having a rotating earth on it, if this works. Hey, there it is. Okay, cool. So again, kind of neat. I can see I could see this being helpful. We'd probably want to change the font. Let's just do a quick. I know I've been going over on a lot of these. Sorry about that. Well, let's just do a quick theme change here and see. See if maybe it's a little easier to see the content. Yeah, the white's a little easier. We'd probably want to move it up and to the left, I guess. But again, that's 3i Atlas's perspective as the aliens are coming to rule over all of us, I guess. Okay, so iframes. Iframes are actually pretty neat. Again, this is not what you would normally think about when you think about iframes. I guess we did want to do, or I did want to do a quick search and ask if this is something that is in Quarto. So I'm going to see if that comes up with anything. Okay, so it is a Quarto specification. What he's offering is just the files that are specifically identifying the thing that we're embedding. So we should also just be able to fully embed a web page. So again, we could do, theoretically, we could do this week's slides. So that's good to know. I guess that makes a lot of sense. So we should be able to do this week's slides. We'll see if they actually want quotes on that. No, they don't. So this is this week's slides, but it's coming up within our current slide. Wow, that's confusing, isn't it? That's very confusing. Now I'm not seeing the other content. Probably should have. Let's move that. It might be too much to do like an entire slide deck like that. Yeah, it seems if we do that it just wants to pull up the entire slide deck. So we would have to play with that a little bit more. Just before we quit, and I know I keep playing here with stuff, but let's try Google. It is just neat that you can kind of you can have so much flexibility over kind of how this stuff displays, where it displays, what you're pulling from, all this interconnectivity with stuff. Yeah, there's again some of these it's not liking our specification directly, so it's possible that the URL is just not something that it likes. Whoa, look at that. It's messing with my tabs. Google, we may have actually, we may have created that portal to a different dimension. So some of the background iframe specification is operating a little funny without us reading the documentation of it. Using it in conjunction with Emil's kind of pre-specified the way things look, that actually works pretty slick. So if you like something on Emil's page, I would say go ahead and grab it and use it. Maybe we'll just leave with meatballs here. Meatballs, what was it, index? Without having to go back to it, I think it was index. Yeah, there we go. And again, you can see my iframe preview being a little wonky, but there we go. I like the meatballs, to offend some Italians. Sorry, Italians, I don't mean to offend you, but I do like the meatballs. All right. That's it. I think everybody, thank you for being here. Like I said, I'll try to remember to put timestamps in these for people that are accessing them now, not live, but after the fact. And next week, look for something starting with the letter J. I did get a neat idea this morning from someone that pops by these, and then might try to implement it next week. We'll see. Stay tuned. All right. Good night.